The ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting is being held in the Philippines, this year's ASEAN chair, from July 21st to 24th. Against the backdrop of the Iran war and China-Philippines standoff in the South China Sea, the host, Filipino Foreign Minister Maria Teresa Lazaro, in her opening remarks, called on all parties to respect each other's sovereignty and resolve disputes peacefully. Watch.
We live in a time defined by what I call the three U's: upheaval, uncertainty, and unpredictability. As developments around the world continue to strain global peace, security, and stability, it is highly fitting to recall our theme for this year, Navigating Our Future Together. We honor the fundamental principles we have successfully guided ASEAN for 5 decades: mutual respect for sovereignty, non-interference, and the peaceful settlement of disputes.
ASEAN's Foreign Ministers meeting's first joint statement this year called for restraint and the preservation of freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. So how are the US-Iran conflict and maritime security challenges affecting ASEAN right now? How can the bloc safeguard stability in the South China Sea while still maintaining balance amidst US-China rivalry? Meanwhile, what does the meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi reveal about the current state of U.S.-China relations? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks, everybody. I'm Wen-Ti Song. To unpack these issues, I'm joined by Cho-Ping Hu, co-founder and senior fellow of EAIR, the East Asian International Relations Caucus, and from Bangkok, Ivy Kwek, founder and CEO of Aurora Insights, a corporate geopolitical advisory firm. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the 2016 South China Sea arbitration, yet China-Philippines tension still remains. Although ASEAN and China pledged in 2002 to work towards a Code of Conduct, COC, for South China Sea to manage maritime disputes and reduce the risk of conflict. However, almost a quarter century later, that Code of Conduct remains a work in progress. But of course, both sides have expressed hopes for accelerating the negotiations. Take a look.
On the issue of South China Sea, we have been working together for some time. Since we had the Declaration of Code of Conduct in South China Sea, the DOC, which of course in the early phase we focus on how we can build confidence between the two sides on the one hand, and of course also to implement the practical activities in order to raise the level of confidence between the two sides.
All right, Cho-Ping, let me start with you on this latest deliverable, the ASEAN Foreign Minister meeting joint communique. What sentiment on China do you sense from this latest statement?
Well, I think there is some differences between the claimant states and non-claimant states in the South China Sea. So that's only on the, and it also comes on the heel of the 10th anniversary of the arbitral ruling award to the Philippines. So other than this issue, I think between ASEAN and China, in general, they agree with the extent of economic development, which is very crucial to the region. And of course, we are also looking at how US-China strategic competition is in this region. Would it further divide the regional countries? And of course, we hope that ASEAN platform will always enable some form of a conciliation to take place between the two great powers.
All right, and do you see ASEAN moving towards a somewhat more firmer collective position on this?
Well, I personally is more pessimistic about this. And given the fact that Thailand-Cambodia conflict has not been fully resolved yet. So every country are now trying to protect their own interests. So in comparison to other regions, I would say that Southeast Asia as a whole still can achieve some form of consensus for common interests, but we may still be divided by difficult and tough issues.
All right, thank you, Cho-Ping. Let me come to Ivy. So Cho-Ping talked about this notion of different groupings, claimant states, non-claimant states. Also, there are outstanding issues internally among some member states as well. So how do you see the state of ASEAN unity at this juncture when it comes to South China Sea and when it comes to China?
Yeah, the South China Sea issue has been such a long-standing issue for the region. I have been in this industry for 16 years, and unfortunately today we are still talking about very similar challenges and bottlenecks that we talked about when I was a junior analyst. So I think that it is about time that ASEAN find a way, however hard it is, to move beyond the rhetorics and actually come to a solution on this issue. And I mean, if we need any more convincing, I think that this week the incident over Second Thomas Shaw should yet again remind us that unresolved issues on South China Sea is literally hurting people in ASEAN. And also, it's not just about the sovereign claim, but it also have a very real impact on companies, whether it's shipping companies or those that are in the maritime industry, as well as the businesses that are relying on those shipping links for their goods and their products. So it is very important that ASEAN find a way to move beyond the rhetorics and have real actions on this issue.
And Ivy, would you mind unpack a little bit more in terms of this kind of geopolitical volatility for the private sector? What kind of impact concretely are they talking about? More insurance premium or some other challenges facing them?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, having a higher insurance premium is definitely one of those. And also the supply chain, the resilience to the supply chain that has now been disrupted, not just in South China Sea, but as well as what is going on in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz. So it's, again, reminding us how important a freedom of navigation is and the importance of the maritime domain to the livelihood of the region.
So Ivy, you've been working on South China Sea for quite a while now, and we know that this ideal COC, Code of Conduct for Parties' Behavior in South China Sea, they started talking about it back in 2002. So this is year 24. Do you see year 24 or maybe year 25 to be the charm this time around?
Well, we know that the host this year, the Philippines, they set a very ambitious target of concluding it this year. They are pushing it really hard because, rightly so, because the Philippines has one of the highest stakes, being the country that has the most frequent clashes with China in the South China Sea, but also because what we see at the Strait of Hormuz has once again remind us on the urgency of securing our waters. So I think that it's quite unlikely that it will conclude this year. And it's predominantly because of two sticking points that have been ongoing for a while. And one is whether or not the code of conduct should be binding, legally binding. That is something that most ASEAN states would like it to be, but it's something that China has not committed to. And then the second thing is this definition of outside power. I think there's a notion of China wanting to restrict the role of the so-called outside power, such as the U.S. or Japan or other non-claimant states, with their activities in South China Sea.
When it comes to Southeast Asia, of course, there's the maritime dispute, there's this security defense challenges here and there, gray zone coercion, but there are also other aspects more about, I guess, a broader economic security umbrella, supply chain resilience, energy security. We know that China has also at times been trying to, let's say, make political use of their control over critical mineral, for example. Are these broader economic security issues affecting ASEAN's posture when it comes to China at all?
Oh, yeah, sure. So economic security is extremely important to all Southeast Asian countries. So this is why, despite the Chinese coercion in the South China Sea, for example, some claimant states like Malaysia and Brunei chose to be more quiet about it. But it doesn't mean that we did not do anything. For example, Malaysia stood up to China when it comes to our oil and gas activities in our part of the South China Sea features. So there is a red line to be drawn. And in terms of how are we going to deal with China, there are at least two platforms. So one would be the bilateral and the second multilateral. So multilaterally, ASEAN, China, and ASEAN with many other dialogue partners as well. So we have technological, economy, transportation, communication, even defense with our many other dialogue partners as well.
So when you talk about multilateral platforms, what vehicles are there? Are we talking about ASEAN, or are there other vehicles as well for doing that dialogue?
I think the most functional one would be the ASEAN Defense Ministerial Meeting. So, and that is called ADMN and Plus. So on the Plus platform, we actually had the working group, for example, Maritime Security Working Group, and many others with our partner countries.
Right. All right. Thank you for that. How optimistic, how effective do you think these vehicles have been, though?
It has been highly beneficial, and this is some of the rare area and domain and platform that we are actually actively working with each other.
All right. Thank you for that, Chopin. So let's look at ASEAN's posture amidst this growing U.S.-China rivalry. This U.S.-China competition strategically, so much discussion has been made about ASEAN's core strategy, which often revolves around the notion of hedging and ASEAN centrality. These are often seen as attempts to preserve space for strategic autonomy and multilateralism. Meanwhile, Southeast Asia is becoming also a key partner that's been courted by both the US and China due to ASEAN's vast market, human capital, and regional stabilizing role. Here's how one of the superpowers framed their pitch to Southeast Asia.
We're delivering $2.5 billion in U.S. government strategic investments in Southeast Asia, reinforcing our commitment to the region. And we're investing because the development of ASEAN is also in the interest of the United States. This is not charity. This is not something we're doing because we're nice people, although I believe we are nice people, but it's in our national interest.
Ivy, let me ask you, how do you look at how ASEAN is managing this U.S.-China competition to win over hearts and minds of ASEAN states?
So under President Trump, we can see that the U.S. approach towards the region is much narrower and also more transaction rather than strategic. So we have seen that there are certain things that the U.S. care about a lot. So, for example, the critical minerals, and the U.S. is pursuing a critical mineral deals with a few of ASEAN countries, including Malaysia and Thailand, and they have also courted the Philippines and Singapore to sign onto its PAC Silica framework. And then on the other hand, China, it continues to also court Southeast Asia because Southeast Asia is still very integral to its neighborhood diplomacy. And China does it more through the building of institutions, whether it's RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or the South Shanghai Cooperation, or organization, or the latest one being the World AI Cooperation Organization that China has announced. So we can see that both superpowers are competing for ASEAN's alignment, so to speak. And I think that for ASEAN, again, they will pick and choose to see how each of the agenda that's being pursued by either US or China is of interest to them.
Thank you. And how about your take, Chopin? How do you see this contrast between how American and how Chinese may be trying to court Southeast Asia? Difference in approaches, which approach seem to work better for this Southeast Asian context?
Yeah, I would say China is doing much more than what the United States has been doing in the region. So, for example, China has been actively inviting Southeast Asian regional experts, industrial representative, and political representation to visit China, for example. So this year alone, I have seen so many parallel events that is being held in China. And a lot of our regional friends are being invited again and again to visit the country. And because of the US aid, so
the funding cuts against
yes,
the American
exactly.
Foreign Aid Agency.
So a lot of the long-established American presence has receded in the region. For example, in Malaysia as well, there was some discussion about withdrawing some military aid, roused by the Prime Minister's suggestion to remove Israeli presence from the country. So, and also interestingly, the other US allies like France, UK, and especially Australia are doing a lot of engagement with Southeast Asian counterparts. And it is from and through their engagement with the regional countries that US counterparts are still being engaged in the region.
All right, okay, that's good to see other partners, I guess, also stepping out to fill the void in a sense. So, all right, so we discussed how Americans and Chinese are engaged in the region. How do you see the region itself is trying to find its rightful balance in terms of its place amid this bipolar competition?
So I think there are differences between the mainland Southeast Asian countries and maritime Southeast Asian countries. For example, the Kunming and Laos railway was so successful because Laos is the only landlocked country in Southeast Asia. So it actually created a trade boom in the country, in a small landlocked country. So needless to say, Laos-China relation is on the uptick right now. And for some other countries, interestingly, like Cambodia and Thailand, because of the conflict and China just a few days ago asking them again to consider to de-escalate further. And
But China's trying to play that peace broker role.
That's right. And Cambodia, probably because of this, because they are not happy with how they are being treated, so they actually put some of the cooperation with China on hold. So there are some interesting dynamics that we can observe in the mainland Southeast Asia and of course in maritime Southeast Asia, South China Sea aside. Industrial cooperation between China and Indonesia has taken a much better pace, but now also slowed down because of Indonesia's internal domestic hurdles at the moment.
Right, fascinating discussion. How do you see the Iran war is affecting how ASEAN or how Southeast Asia may be looking at the U.S., both in terms of U.S. decision-making in foreign policy terms, but also in terms of how U.S. is doing in terms of war performance?
So I will dissect this in two ways. One would be that what does Southeast Asian country feel about what the U.S. is doing in the Middle East? And I would say quite bluntly that I think most Southeast Asia countries see the U.S. as being a bully, whether it is towards Iran or towards Venezuela. And this, needless to say, does not bode well for the trust towards the U.S. Southeast Asia countries have experienced it themselves, where U.S. is essentially punishing the Southeast Asian country through tariffs for essentially doing business with China. Second point is that with the U.S. commitment in the Middle East, will the U.S. still be able to uphold its commitment to the region? We've seen that the Indo-Pacific strategy has been downplayed under this current administration. They have even changed the name of Indo-Pacific Command back to Pacific Command, the U.S. Pacific Command. So we have definitely seen a shift in terms of U.S. foreign policy posture.
How is the region reading it in terms of U.S. intention behind this naming change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's signaling a shift away from a Indo-Pacific focus, and it seems that the U.S. have other interests in other regions, especially at the moment in the Middle East.
Qiuping, let me ask you. One of your co-founders, of course, at EAR, Qin Shuiguo, known for this idea of strategic hedging in terms of how he describes Southeast Asian foreign policy behavior. Today, Southeast Asian politics, is it still hedging all the way down, or do you see new variations taking shape?
So many thanks to Cheng Chui Quick's very renowned framework. So allow me to also reiterate some of his idea about this. So there are political hedging, economic hedging, and also military hedging. And there are also variation from the light hedger to the heavy hedger.
Right.
So Vietnam is one of the heaviest hedger among the Southeast Asian countries. So not only its upgraded comprehensive strategic partnership with the United States, So that put US and China on par for Vietnam. But it still have outstanding South China Sea dispute in the Paracel Islands with China. And I just saw the news a few days ago, they just sent a naval delegation visiting China while China-Philippine South China Sea dispute is ongoing. So that qualifies Vietnam as one of the heaviest hedger, for example.
Wow.
But not all of us exhibit the same behavior. So in this sense, the light hedger, such as the lightest one, I would say, is Brunei. So they keep a very respectful relationship with both sides. And some people may accuse them just like, they are more pro-China and so on. But for Southeast Asia, we know that it is the neutrality and non-alignment posture that we are trying to maintain.
Okay, I mean, so hedging in this formulation almost sounds like a way to manage foreign policy split personalities, or a way to compartmentalize different spheres of their relationship with those superpowers.
If I may add, I think that Southeast Asia has gotten very good at balancing both their economic interests and also their strategic or political interests. And to a lot of outsiders, it seems like it's indecisions, but it's actually not. We would argue that it is actually a very disciplined, strategic choice to be able to hedge the way that Southeast Asia is hedged, to be able to make very hard decisions in this very unforgiving geopolitical environment.
All right, thank you both. A great nuanced perspective. So let's look at the U.S.-China diet for a second. So U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, they took the opportunity to hold talks on the sidelines of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting recently. The discussions cover a wide range of issues, including the situation in the Middle East, China-Japan tensions, China-Philippines dispute in South China Sea, Chinese President Xi Jinping's planned visit to the U.S. in September, and of course, Taiwan. Watch.
These are the two most powerful countries in the world, particularly economics, but also, we have to have a relationship. And obviously there are areas of great differences. Both sides will acknowledge that. We'll have to work through those, and I think these differences will exist for the foreseeable future. And our job is to sort of manage those so that they never get out of control.
Ivy, how do you look at U.S.-China relations today in terms of managing this so-called managed strategic competition? Are they building meaningful and effective security guardrails at the moment?
So if you just look back at the summit in May where Trump visited Beijing, it was very scant on the details. There was no structural breakthroughs. But it did achieve one thing, which is the perception of managed stability, and it is to the benefit of both powers. And the perception itself is the guardrail that there is an understanding that both sides want a stable bilateral relationship between the biggest superpower in the world right now.
And Chopin, what's your take on this? How the competition is being managed, and are the security guardrails in place?
So when Xi Jinping and Donald Trump met in Beijing, so when they both agree on the constructive strategic stability, so we have doubted whether it is rhetoric or not. So I'm quite surprised to hear Marco Rubio actually mention it again, strategic stability, in his meeting with Wang Yi.
It's becoming a thing.
Yeah. So, and because actually both Xi and Trump agree that this would be the framework between the two of them for the next 3 years. So I think both sides are still committed to that. And the fact that Wang Yi also replied with bilateral strategic stability. So despite Rubio mentioned there are some differences in this meeting, but they are working towards clearing out the differences so that the Xi's trip to US can be realized.
And how do you look at this new curveball that Trump has just recently thrown out, which is Trump accusing China of trying to meddle in the U.S. 2020 election? Maybe
the Rubio-Wang meeting didn't go so well that Trump think that he should throw out a Trump card just to rattle China a bit and look, if you don't agree to our terms, then maybe the visit would be called off or something like that.
Ivy, any main indicators you'll be watching out for in terms of looking at how U.S.-China relation may evolve in the months to come?
Yes, I would definitely be watching very closely on the September visit, Xi's visit to Washington. Specifically, it would be interesting to watch about the trade truce that was agreed between the U.S. and China last October. It's supposed to expire in November, and it will be very interesting to watch whether the visit would bring about a concrete result on extending the trade truce. I will also be watching if both U.S. and China make any headways in terms of resolving any structural tensions, whether it's on issues like AI governance, semiconductor access, or rare earths and nuclear arms control, just to name a few. So these are the issues that will determine whether the relationship will hold past the photo op.
All right, thank you, Ivy. Any final thoughts from you, Cho-Ping?
Yes, so the specifics about the trade truce is about critical mineral export control by China. So especially the heavy rare earth that the U.S. defense industry require to continue to manufacture their defense equipments. So will the ceasefire being extended? So this is something that we are definitely watching very closely.
All right, thank you. On that note, that's about all the time we have today. So thank you, Cho-Ping. Thank you, Ivy, for sharing your time and your insight today. All right, that's our show. Thank you for tuning in. Please come check us out on YouTube. And until next time, it's good night from us from Taiwan.